morning. We are learning how to do passive range of motion on our ECMO patients. We have physical therapy here along with our patient, Misha Butcher. And Ivan and Jimmy are going to show us the regimen that we should be doing on our ECMO patients.
You know, as our bodies lie down at rest, you kind of fall into a certain position. And unfortunately, if you stay in that position, you will stay in that position. Our biggest foes, obviously, are the calf muscles. Everybody's aware that those muscles get tight really quickly. Your Achilles tendon is a big, thick ligament, and once he shortens, it's very, very, very hard to fix that again. We encounter that later on in rehab. The patients can barely stand up because those are so tight. The multipodous boots and all that do help, but ranging and stretching those muscles is the most important thing we could do. So I'm gonna start kind of distal and kind of work my way up. So the first thing I like to do is just kind of grab the heel, actually put my hand in it, and then I just kind of lean into it a little bit. Obviously, there's gonna be a little stretch there. And gentle goes a long way. You don't wanna be very aggressive. You wanna just hold it for 20 seconds or so, and then back again. I usually just take the second that I'm letting it rest to do inversion, eversion, just kind of rock the foot in and out. And I'll do that 5-6 times, and then I'll go ahead and stretch that calf one more time. Just a nice gentle stretch. Obviously, we're not being very aggressive here. So from there, go back to this, and I'll do that. I'll go through it 3 times. And again, having my hand here, I get to use my forearm kind of as the pushing mechanism. That way my body mechanics are good. You don't want to like do this because it's actually pretty hard and it's going to be rough on you. This, you kind of lean into it so you don't have to struggle. From here, I usually put my hand under the patient's knee and I'll go into a little bit of a kind of hip range of motion. Obviously, if you have a femoral line, you want to be cautious here. There is no limitation on a femoral line on range of motion other than just be cautious. You could put your hand on the actual line to make sure it comes with you and you're not stretching the actual line, but you can range as far as you can. If there is a line, 90 is probably good. Be cautious as well if the patient has a history of a total hip replacement. You don't want to go past 90 anyway, because then you'll have a dislocated hip along with everything else that's going on. So again, nice and gentle. I'm not looking for a big stretch here, but like anything else, that hip joint, when you're lying down, it tends to want to roll out and kind of just sit there. So you want to range it out a little bit. You don't want to go here because that's going to feel kind of awkward on the patient. You want them up and down, kind of in a little bit of abduction. From here, I'll usually just gently kind of rotate this way and just stretch that hip just gently, just a little bit. Again, you don't want to be very aggressive. I don't go the other way because again, I want to protect that hip. That person is already probably going to be a little deconditioned. When you internally rotate a hip, that's when they want to dislocate. So I'm okay going this way. I'm not going to go this way and I'll fall out. I'm going to kind of stay just a neutral. When she's at rest, that hip is going to fall that way anyway. So you're not really going to stretch that way. From here, I'll let the leg back out and I'll bring the whole leg out towards me and back in. You're being a very good patient. You're not helping me a whole lot. And I'll do this one about 10 times. That's the leg. Okay, arm. Don't help, you're unconscious. I would have the bed a little higher. Again, body mechanics, you don't want to have to lean down on it. Same thing as the lower extremity. I start distal and I work my way proximal. I'll do just a little bit of wrist, just back and forth. Again, your hand is kind of going to do this at rest. So believe it or not, it is going to get tight. You know, you get this kind of claw hand things going on. So you just want to work a little bit on extension and just go through the wrist. You want to bring the wrist this way and that way as well. If you feel like those fingers are getting a little tight, go ahead and stretch fingers as well. We don't like to overstretch fingers this way so much because then you actually do too much of a good thing. But if you feel like they're starting to kind of dig down a little bit, you definitely want to start kind of just moving those fingers out. From here, literally the next one is just your elbow joint. Now your elbow joint doesn't really come straight up like that. It kind of rotates as it comes. So you want to be mindful that you want to kind of let it rotate naturally as you bend it. And we kind of have a couple of different joints in our elbow mechanism. So I like to do kind of both at once as I range her hand. Or you could, individually just go this way and then this way as well. But I figure your time is valuable, so you could double up here. Hand positions are important. Obviously, I have my hand on her elbow, and on the other hand, I'm literally looking my thumb in her thumb. Now, shoulder, we have the same issue as the lower extremity. If you have an axillary line, you want to be cautious with that. You don't want to go really crazy above above 90 degrees. That being said, pretty much that's what we want. We want as much above 90 degrees as possible. So you just have to be cautious with those lines. There is no limitations on the book, but I would be very cautious with those lines if I was doing this. Here I do want to change my hand position. I kind of just want to get her hand really close to my body, and I'll kind of go across first, just to get a feeling how that shoulder joint feels. If it feels really tight from here, then I have a good idea how far that way I'm going to be able to go. Obviously, your patient is probably not going to be in the best possible physical fitness when it's a very, very young patient, so you want to be very careful with those shoulder joints. They're very delicate. Then from here, we go down, and obviously you want to go up. I would have the line in my hand and literally hold it here with a little slack. So when I go this way, I could feel if I'm pulling anything on my hand, not on the patient. Kind of the same thing you would try to chest tube or something like that. You just want to have it in your hand. So you, as far as you can, obviously a range of motion is perfect, so she's not giving me any. But if you feel any resistance at all, stop there. Don't, you're not fixing anything, you're just trying to keep what you have. Passive range of motion, obviously the person is not actively helping you. However, kind of like CPR, when you're moving that muscle, those tissues are extending and flexing, and you're trying to do your best to prevent as much atrophy as possible. Also, not to mention, you're preventing all that contractures that down the line are so hard to fix, especially down there in those guys. You could do some neck range of motion if you feel like the patient needs it. I would, and it's pretty simple. You usually would like to just get in this position if you can. I know the head of the bed might be on the way, and I would just do flexion extension very gently, and I would just do a little side bending very gently, and a little rotation very gently. And if the person's neck isn't particularly tight, you could probably skip that. But they do get tight as well. And later on, there's a lot of pain associated with that. Obviously, if you have a jugular line or something like that, you might want to just skip that altogether. Because those are really hard to hold as you're doing things. Anything else? I believe that's everything. Any questions?
How often should you do this?
Every day. Every day, preferably a couple times a day.
So every shift?
Every shift.
More than once a shift? Or?
It would be ideal if it can be done. I don't know the logistic of the more the better. 3-4 times a day would be great. And it shouldn't take you more than 15 minutes to do this. It should be nice and flow, like one activity kind of flows into another one, and you get your own little groove going, and it happens really quickly. The most important thing is that it gets done. A 10-minute range of motion process is 100% better than a 0-minute range of motion process. If you spend 4 minutes doing it, even if you just do this half now and that half later, you just improve that patient by 100%. Versus not doing it. So it isn't all or nothing. It's kind of like exercising. Everybody goes, what exercise works? Well, the one you do works. The one you plan for doesn't help you. So even if you only do a little bit, that little bit will help. If you have 5 minutes walking by, stretch those ankles. Stretch those ankles. Stretch a little bit of the big muscles that are the ones that are going to be more likely to get tight on you. So as you get to know your patient, you see what's getting tight. If that person is kind of drawing in a little bit and those arms are getting a little tight, you want to just put a little more time in those. And more is better, but anything is 100% better than nothing. So you want to do it as much as you can, even if it's a little bit. So it isn't all or nothing, whatever you could do for that patient. But again, if you're going to do one thing, stretch those ankles, because those are going to get tight in no time. And even in POTUS boots, those calf muscles are so strong that even in POTUS boots, you're still pushing down. You're still shortening those muscles. So range of motions are, and at least on the lower leg, is very, very important.
All right.
Anything else?
I do see one of the problem is the majority of patients are bilaterally femoral cannula. When you do the range of motion, they're bound to be, unless somebody's holding right there, it will create a little bit of gap. Once they start bleeding, that's one of the biggest problems we encounter. It's pretty hard to control when you have to pat them.
And I agree completely with that.
So
On
there has
that
to be
one,
another person other than just holding the line itself, but the puncture site, that could be, because even if you do just that, if you do that, anytime you do that, there's a little bit of gap creating, because when we turn the patient, that's when we start to having a lot of problems, and that's something we could.
oh no, that's something you have to be cautious about. And if you get to this point and you start noticing that, well, back up a little, or go to the point that you can. Again, something is better than nothing. Obviously, we don't want to hurt the patient. And you're not trying to make him into an Olympic athlete either. You're trying to just make sure those joints are good. So that's the biggest thing with ECMO, is those big lines it's a big opening. So you have to be just cautious. But again, something is better than nothing. So if you feel like you need to skip the range of the hip part, or just go very, very, very small range, that's excellent and perfectly acceptable. And if the person is likely to have an issue with bleeding, or God forbid, a line problem, use your common sense. But we do that as well. We, like when we have patients in dialysis and all that, we adjust our ranging and our exercises accordingly, because we don't want to have to call you guys that we broke something. You guys love that, right?
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.